decided to do a kind of crazy thing, and I am going to vlog all of Victober. I'm super excited about it. I am in my classroom. This is not home. I decided to go ahead and start filming here. I think a lot of my updates will probably be filmed from here because it's easier to find a quiet moment in my classroom than it is to find one in my home with my puppy. But I'm super excited about this. I'm also excited that outside right now, it finally feels like fall. So look at that. We got some yellowing on the leaves and stuff. It finally feels like fall. Super excited about all of these things. It's about to be Victober. We're gonna start reading Uncle Silas tonight. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna do with a whole month-long vlog. I'm not generally a month-long vlogger. This is just like an impulse thing, and maybe I'll get rid of all of this footage and not do it. But right now it feels like a really good idea, and I'm really excited to try it. So hopefully I'm gonna get better about knowing what I'm going to say as we move forward. But for now, there's my blank bulletin board. But for now, I'm about to go home for the day and get started on my first read of Victober 2022. And it's gonna be Uncle Silas by LeFanu. It's gonna be creepy, it's gonna be spooky, it's fall outside, it's cold, butternut squash soup, and it's gonna be awesome. So I'll see you then. Hi, I hope you can hear me. I just wanted to check in about Uncle Silas. I am about to get home, and I know that once I get in the door, the puppy will not let me do this. But let me get down these stairs here. Okay. So I am at the point in Uncle Silas where the governess has arrived. So it starts with this amazing vilification of Swedenborgians, which I don't know if that's a real word, but that's the word they use. And LeFanu has a thing against Swedenborgians. I remembered, I have hair in my mouth. I remembered from Green Tea that he talked something. I want to reread that story now, but he talked about Swedenborgians. And then in this one, the father is involved in some kind of occult activity and is a Swedenborg follower. The mother dies, and there's this creepy but also kind of heartwarming interaction with a man from London who is also a Swedenborgian. And you turn this into a drinking game. Every time I say Swedenborgian, have a sip. And then the governess arrives, and she's super, super creepy. And all we know about Uncle Silas so far is that the girl, who's the narrator of the story, who I think is an adult when she's narrating the story, she's never met Uncle Silas. She's curious about Uncle Silas. Uncle Silas is kind of a black sheep in the family, maybe. She thinks her father feels sad when he thinks about Uncle Silas, but he's like, why do you think that? And yeah, the father's got some crazy, creepy stuff going on, which maybe I'll say more about when it becomes important, if it becomes important in the future things about a cabinet and a key and a man who's his friend who's supposed to call him, and when he does, he must go. I don't know if it's a real man. I don't know if that's Uncle Silas, like the narrator thinks, if that's God or Satan or what. This book is phenomenal so far. I am super enjoying it. But it's also got some anti-Semitism and some racism and stuff, which we can unpack more about when I'm not walking down the street. But I'm going to arrive home soon, so I'm going to end this now. Hi, I just filmed my wrap up, but while she is busy chewing on her toy box, I wanted to do a quick Victober update. I've been reading this morning some Gerard Manley Hopkins poems, and I wanted to share a couple of lines and a couple, maybe just one poem. So one is called Heaven Haven, and it is about a nun that takes the veil, is what it says. And the poem is, I love the way this man writes. So the poem goes, I have desired to go where springs not fail, to fields where flies no sharp and sided hail, and a few little lilies blow. And I have asked to be where no storms come, where the green swell is in the havens dumb, and out of the swing of the sea. I have asked to go where I am out of the swing of the sea. I just love that so much. I think that's just one of the most beautiful lines ever in a poem. I just love that so much. And then another line that I came across, I won't read the whole poem because it's a lot longer, but there is a line. This is a poem, this is from a poem called St. Thomas, S. Tome Aquinatus, Rhythmus ADSS Sacramentum. So obviously that is in Latin, which I never studied, but the line is, truth himself speaks truly, or there's nothing true. Truth himself speaks truly, or there's nothing true. I just love it. I love it so much. So I am fully enjoying the poetry prompt for Victober. But even more than that, I am fully enjoying Uncle Silas. I've been reading this at school and I don't have access to my little tabs at school. I will from now on. But I've been using sticky notes and they are very prominent. Let's talk a little bit about Uncle Silas. Uncle Silas is such a wild book. And I know that I did kind of a check-in on my walk home. But there are a couple of things that I want to say, like, the writing in this is phenomenal. There are definitely some questionable things, like there's some race things, and there's some anti-Semitic talk, and I think that there's a character that is a quote-unquote Moor who is kind of involved in the occult, I think. Then there's the Swedenborgians. What is up with LeFanu and the Swedenborgians? I need to do a Google search on his own personal faith. I know his father was a pastor and he did not, in the Anglican church, and he did not get on with his father, but I don't know if that means that he was a Christian. I don't know if he's pro-Swedenborgian or anti-Swedenborgian at this point, but the Swedenborgians, which is just a fun word to say, show up so often in his work. And I haven't had a chance to reread Green Tea yet, but I will. He's got the woman, what am I trying to say? The governess, who's not a nice lady, who I think is there. I think everybody is just really trying to get Maud's inheritance, but we don't even know if Maud has an inheritance. And yesterday I stopped reading just at the point where, spoilers. I stopped just at the point where Maud's father dies, and I stopped on purpose because I was like, I can't keep reading right now and I have to know what happens next, so I'm just gonna stop. So I don't know if they found a will, if he has a will. I don't know if there even is an inheritance, but I feel like all these people are like coming out of the woodwork, like just crawling out from under their rocks and trying to weasel their way into her life to get some money, and I don't know that there is any money, and Maud doesn't know anything about it. But the focus has been so much on the kind of occult vibe that the father has created in the home, precipitated by the death of the mother. So when the mother died, instead of calling in the local Anglican priest to pray with him, he calls a Moor, quote unquote, from London, who happens to be a practitioner of Swedenborg philosophy or religion or ideas or whatever. And that was a really interesting part. That was a really interesting part where he ends up taking this man ends up taking the little girl for a walk. At that time, we didn't know her name yet. She doesn't get a name until quite later on, till the governess arrives. But there is no governess. The father is in mourning, and the house is kind of in disarray. And he takes her on a walk and takes her to a point where there's a wall and she can't see over it. And he's taller, and he's like, I can see over this wall, and I can tell you all these things that are over this wall. I can tell you all the things that are beyond. And to you, it's just a story, but you believe me. And then he walks her there, and she sees physically like everything that he said was there. And then he takes her to her mother's tomb, and he's like, just like I could see over that wall and you couldn't, here's what I can see over the wall that separates you from your mother. And you should believe me, because someday you're gonna, just like we just did, walk to it yourself. And that was really profound, like that whole point. And I'm like, is LeFanu pro-Swedenborgian, or are the Swedenborgians supposed to be viewed as these creepy occult people with these creepy occult practices like he presents them? Like, that belief system is what brings about this knowledge of ghosts, etc., that set the tone for people to be able to maybe take advantage of Maud. I mean, it's apparent that the quote-unquote governess is there with nefarious purposes. She sets up this story. She's like, I hear this ghost, these ruffling skirts and these panting breaths in the hallway, and then the ghost is gone. And then, of course, she's using that to cover her own rustling skirts and panting breath as she searches through the mansion herself, trying to find wealth and documents and things like that, so she can blame those sounds on a ghost or scare a young girl into staying in her room and out of sight while she does those things. Right? It's a fun read. It's a really fun read. And I really enjoy LeFanu's writing style. It's very, very easy to read. It's also very Victorian. It feels very Victorian, but at the same time, it's super accessible. I think this would be a great, like, first Victorian novel to read. I really do. It is definitely sensationalist, even though LeFanu makes a little comment at the beginning about not wanting it to be called a sensationalist novel, and really kind of comparing himself to Wilkie Collins a lot. It's interesting. I also learned that Dickens was kind of obsessed with LeFanu, and Dickens had a friend who saw spirits, a woman, and he wrote to LeFanu based on Green Tea, on the short story Green Tea, and his discussion of like the veil and lifting the veil and seeing beyond the veil in Green Tea. Dickens wrote to LeFanu saying, you're obviously an expert, and I have this friend who has this issue, and will you please tell her everything you know? I find it all so fascinating, like the spiritualist movement and all of those things and people who were involved in that. And I'm just trying to figure out if LeFanu looks positively or negatively on it, because I can't tell with this book. And I think that's one of the things that keeps driving me back to it. And I don't need it to tell me what he thinks. I really don't. But it's just an added layer that I personally really enjoy. Anyway, so that is how Victober is going. It is the 2nd of October, and I started a couple of days early. I think that I will probably be able to finish Uncle Silas this week, And then I think I want to dive into the Mayor of Casterbridge and get it over with. I am hoping that I'm going to enjoy it, but I just don't know if I will. So I would like to finish those 2 books this week. We'll see how that goes. I do have to go right now because my puppy is now chewing on the remote control for the television. So I have to go. But this was a fun check-in, and I will see you soon. Just want to do a quick check-in on Uncle Silas. I have reached the part of the will, like the reading of the will, and it seems really unsafe. Like Uncle Silas has like protection of her, or he's in charge of her until she's 21, and she inherits everything. But if she dies before she inherits everything, then it goes to the next of kin and the next heir-in-law. And who should that be but Uncle Silas? And everybody keeps saying like what a godly man Uncle Silas is, but we haven't met him yet, and he seems to be surrounding himself with super duper sketchy people. Super duper sketchy people. And I just think that this is such a bad idea. And I don't trust anybody in this book at all, except for Maud. But even Maud, I kind of hold in suspicion sometimes. So anyway, just a super quick check-in to say things are not looking safe for Maud. Somebody needs to do a wellness check on this child. Quick check-in on a Tuesday morning for the vlog. I have arrived here at school and the coffee machine is broken, so I cannot get coffee this morning, and it's gonna be a wild day. I work at a Catholic school. I'm not Catholic, but I work at a Catholic school. And today we have the blessing of the animals. I did not bring my puppy because, as we all know, she is insane. But, oh my word, there are so many animals around campus right now, and the day hasn't started yet, and I haven't had coffee, and I don't know when I'm gonna get to get it. I hope they fix it before, well, no, I'm not gonna be able to go get it in between the blessing of the animals and my first period class. So they have until when? They have until 10 a.m. to get this coffee machine going so that I can get a cup of coffee and not be terribly grumpy all day long. Also, a second fluorescent bulb has gone out in my room. I have meetings this morning instead of teaching, and so I got here a little bit early, and I just want to try and record my wrap-up thoughts on Uncle Silas, which was amazing. That is the wildest story. You've got a closed door mystery about a suspicious suicide. You've got the main character of the book, Uncle Silas, who doesn't even like physically show up in the story until 200 pages in, pretty much halfway through. You have weird occult type stuff going on. Or possibly going on. You have like creepy underlings doing dark deeds. You have an evil governess who may or may not be even more nefarious than you think. You have attempted murder, you have actual murder, you have everything going on in this book, and it is a whirlwind, wild, fun time. I think it was serialized, and I can totally tell you that if it was serialized in the 1800s and I had been reading it back then, I would have been scrambling every time a new story, like a new section of the story came out, to try and read what came next. It was fly by the seat of your pants, so much fun, so engaging, tons of holes in the story, tons of questionable stuff. Parts of it don't age well, but the story in and of itself is amazing, and I absolutely loved it. And I found out there is the old 1940s movie version that I'm gonna watch to fulfill Petra's challenge. But I also realized that there is an old Peter O'Toole from the 1990s BBC adaptation of Uncle Silas called The Dark Angel. And I had to search high and low to find a DVD of it. It's not available for streaming anywhere in the States anyway. But I did find a DVD. I ordered it. It's not going to be here until like November. I don't know where it's coming from, but overseas somewhere. But I am going to watch that. I think Peter O'Toole as Uncle Silas will be just the right level of yuck. Nothing against Peter O'Toole, but he plays a great yuck. So anyway, that is that. I'm going to end this, and the next book I'm reading, I started it last night, is The Mayor of Casterbridge. That's the group read. I don't know if I'm gonna make it through the whole thing, but I also started a deep dive Google search into wife selling in the Victorian era, because I want to know more. So anyway, that's what's happening, and that's the next thing you'll be seeing me talk about. I have to go find some coffee, find some people. There's nobody around. This place is like a ghost town, a ghost campus, but we have meetings starting in like, I don't know, 20 minutes or something. So I'm gonna go find the people. Bye for now. Hi, check-in about the Mayor of Casterbridge. Hello, 108 pages in one sitting. I freaking love to hate the Mayor of Casterbridge. I love Thomas Hardy right now. I don't even know who I am anymore. I'm having some kind of identity crisis or something. I apologize if you can hear the air conditioner going. You know, it's October in the Pacific Northwest and it's still ridiculously warm and hot. But I have been reading this all night. I thought that I would start reading it, and I'm kind of making myself stop. I could probably read the whole thing tonight. I have never had a Thomas Hardy experience like this before. I have always enjoyed his writing, but I have always been so turned off by his storylines. And I'm not saying that Michael is a likable character, because he's not. He's insufferable. He is a small little man, and he is driving me insane. But I'm loving this book. It has one of the most compelling beginnings of a book that I've read in a very long time. I don't understand the motivation of some of the decisions that some of the characters make, but I'm loving this book, and I'm struggling to identify what is so incredibly satisfying about it to me. I think that maybe, sounds terrible, but I think maybe I'm just that much more bitter now than I was when I first started reading Thomas Hardy and gave him up. Because even though like I just said, I don't understand some of the motivations that some of the characters have for some of their choices. Some of these choices that they're making feel very unrealistic. And that's a weird thing to say for a man who writes like mega realism. But I just don't think she would have come back to him. I don't think, what's her name? Susan. I just don't think Susan would have come back to him. And I just don't think Elizabeth Jane wouldn't be suspicious or wouldn't figure this whole situation out. I just don't think Farfair, or whatever his name is, what's his name? The Irish guy. Michael's like right-hand man. Elizabeth Jane's love. Farfar. I don't know how to say his name. I don't think he would have been so impulsive. And impulsiveness is the hinge with which this whole story swings, isn't it? But I'm loving this book. I have a feeling I'm going to finish it this weekend. And I'm fully prepared, knowing Thomas Hardy like I do, I am fully prepared to absolutely despise the ending of this novel. And it's going to take all my strength to not finish it tonight. I can't. I have to go to sleep tonight. I have to. I look like a crazy person. I have to go to sleep tonight because I have things to do tomorrow. But when I get home from those things tomorrow, it's me and Elizabeth Jane. I'm here for Elizabeth Jane. Oh, hello. So, just finished this masterclass in people being miserable even when they're happy. The end line here, or lines. Her experience had been of a kind to teach her rightly or wrongly the doubtful honor of a brief transit through a sorry world hardly called for effusiveness, even when the path was suddenly irradiated at some half point by daydreams rich as hers. But her strong sense that neither she nor any human being deserved less than was given did not blind her to the fact that there were others receiving less who had deserved much more. And in being forced to class herself among the fortunate, she did not cease to wonder at the persistence of the unforeseen. When the one to whom such unbroken tranquility had been accorded in the adult stage was she whose youth had seemed to teach that happiness was but the occasional episode in a general drama of pain. Thank you, Thomas Hardy. What is wrong with Michael Hinchard? What is wrong with him? Was wrong with him. Spoiler, he's dead. And he leaves this like angsty will that forces her, who stands up for herself for the first time ever, to feel bad about herself for the rest of her life. I loved this book in that I think it's a beautifully written book, and it was very easy to read. And I hate this book because it's just a bunch of miserable people making each other miserable. And the one character that does nothing to hurt anyone in this whole story has to live the rest of her life feeling guilty. What do you think, Lola? What do you think? Do you think that I feel too much pain over this? All right, I've read it. And I read it quickly. 2 days. I read it so fast. It was so readable. It really was so readable. If anybody ever asks me like what Thomas Hardy I would recommend, it's gonna be The Mayor of Casterbridge. It is, I mean, you can see how it's affected me, and yet it is the least miserable Thomas Hardy I've read. And it's just about misery. It's just about miserable people being miserable. It did explain for me, because I was like, why did Susan go back? She would never have gone back to him after the death of her second husband. She would never have chosen to go back. No woman would. But it did explain that. Like, she felt guilty. She thought she was supposed to. Somebody put it in her mind that her second marriage, although happy and safe and respectful, was an abomination of some sort, because it wasn't legal and it wasn't before God. And I guess technically she was married to Michael that whole time. Whatever, sure, okay. But she was happy and healthy and safe and respected. And she chose to leave it to return to him, who had made a life for himself as happy and healthy and safe and respected. What is wrong with Michael Hinchard? And what is wrong with Donald Farfair or Farfay or Farfaray or whatever his last name is? Like, he makes some really questionable choices too, and I don't feel like there's any judgment on him in this book. And he is like not a good man. He is confused about why Michael hates him when he literally takes, so he doesn't know that he's taken Michael's everything and made it his own, but he knows that he out business senses him. He knows that he takes his spot in the business world and in the social world of the town, and he still is like, I don't understand why he doesn't like me. Really? Really, Donald? Really? Elizabeth Jane, she needed a backbone. Through this whole thing, she needed a backbone, and she finally gets one. And it weirdly, only thanks to Thomas Hardy, results in the death of her adoptive father, who she loves, who she turned away once, because he was a total jerk the whole time he knew her. She finally stands up for herself. Well, she learned that lesson. Thomas Hardy. Shouldn't have gone there. I don't know what to read next. I don't know if I should do the Moonstone, because it is another like fun mystery. I say another, I'm thinking Uncle Silas, not Mayor of Casterbridge. Or if I should do Deerbrook because I know it and I know I love it, or if I should do Wives and Daughters, or if I should do Miss Miles. I don't think I'm going to do Miss Miles yet. I don't have an audiobook to go back and forth between, and I want to leave Casterbridge far behind me quickly. So I'm thinking Moonstone. But Wilkie Collins and I have a love-hate relationship. I don't know. Yes, I think Moonstone. I think I'm going to start Moonstone next. I don't know what this is.
And the bright autumn lines of Deerbrook by
Yes! Oh, I knew that.
Number 4.
I'll do one more. Tale of Two Cities!
It was the age of wisdom.
Woohoo!
The epoch of encouragement.
I'm so tired, but here I am, home from work, watching BookTube, and chilling on the sofa. Hi, so you don't know this, but it's been days, and I don't know if you could hear it in my throat, my voice, but I got really sick and I lost days of my life. And I just returned to work yesterday. Hello, Lola. Yeah. I mean, not yesterday, today. I returned to work today, and I came home a little bit early today because I was wiped out, and I'd finished all of my classes and duties and stuff. So I came home a little bit early, and this one was very happy about that. After days and days of nursing me, she was thank you. After days and days of nursing me, she was a little bit upset that I left her this morning. And when I came home, she was very, very happy to see me. And then I also, though, did not read anything in those lost days of my life. So I have not started. So I have not started the Moonstone yet. Look at this little... So I have not started the Moonstone yet, but I will start it soon. I promise she doesn't do this to me all the time. It's just when she thinks I'm not paying attention to her. So mostly when I'm talking to you. So you're a little bit warm. Yeah, you're a little bit warm. Did you catch my cold? Anyway, so I haven't started the Moonstone yet, but I plan on starting that tonight, maybe tomorrow. It's, tomorrow is Friday the 14th, I think. I don't know. I've lost track of days. But I brought, Miss Miles by Charlotte Bronte's friend, to work with me today because I thought that I would read it in these hours that I have at the end of the day that I don't have any responsibilities, and I don't have any grading right now. And I left it at school. So, and then of course I came home early. So I didn't start that yet either, but I will have that and we'll read that tomorrow. I'll start that tomorrow while I'm at work. And I think I'm going to start the Moonstone on audio this evening. And she's eating my hair. She's eating my hair. And as soon as I turn this camera off, she's going to go and play by herself and not bother me hardly at all. This is all for you. This is all because I'm talking to you. And she just can't have that. She can't have me not give 100% attention to her. It just cannot be. Yeah, so that's where we stand. Not where I thought I'd be. I thought I'd be done, or at least halfway done, a little more with the Moonstone by now, but that's not where we are because I got sick. Hi, checking in while I wait for an Uber to get to work today because I'm too tired to walk all the way up there. I'm running a little bit late. So I thought that I would check in about the Moonstone, which I finished and I haven't checked in about at all. It was so fun. I didn't realize that it was going to be that fun. And I kept thinking that it reminded me of Knives Out the whole time. I thought for sure that, spoiler, I thought for sure that the niece, the one who inherits, I'm terrible with names, but the niece had taken it herself to prove a point, and then I thought for sure that the mother had taken it to prove a point, and I was wrong on both counts. So much fun. It was so much fun. I think that it is my favorite Wilkie Collins now, which is which means it has usurped The Lady in White. Every other Wilkie Collins I've ever read, I have disliked a whole lot. But for whatever reason, I really enjoyed this one. It was super fun. I am reading Miss Taylor. No, Mary Taylor is the author. Miss Miles. I am reading Miss Miles by Mary Taylor, Charlotte Bronte's good friend, and we'll tell you more about that later today. Right, so let's go ahead and get ready for the day and talk a little bit about, what's it called? Miss Miles by Mary Taylor. On my Uber ride here to work, my driver was from the Punjab, and so I told him that I had lived in India and I had visited Chandigarh and I had visited the Golden Temple. He got really excited about the Golden Temple because that's his temple in India. So that was really sweet. But then as we pulled into the school, he was like, "You must get paid a lot of money." I was like, yeah, no, no, not at all. But it was pretty funny. Anyway, let's talk about this book right here, which I am loving. I also want to mention that the reason that I didn't say much about the Moonstone is because I ended up listening to the whole thing on audio, which was the first book that I've listened to entirely on audio for Victober, and I don't think I got as much out of it as I'm getting out of reading these ones that are physical. So I'm a little distracted because I'm seeing parents drive up. Anyway, so I am going to talk to you a little bit about Miss Miles, but this is so beautifully written. It does that thing though that the Brontes do, especially Emily, where it uses, it tries to capture the vernacular of Yorkshire, and it's rough to read, so it slows you down. However, there are just some absolutely gorgeous parts in here. For example, like as you read it, you really feel like you are watching it. It's just so beautiful. Here's one sample. It was in this year that a strange man came to the great house wanting a strange thing. He would like to buy, or lease, a few fields near the beck and build a mill there. He was no gentleman in appearance, and his speech would have been unintelligible to anyone not born in the neighborhood. Even in his own dialect, he was not fluent enough to make Mr. Everard understand how he hoped to be able to give 5 times the old rent for the fields and yet drive a profitable trade. So I liked that first line, that it was in this year that a strange man came to a great house wanting a strange thing. The book is just full of stuff like that. Let's see. There is just this wonderful bit where kids are going out to slide, which I'll have to find for you later because I can't find it right now. But it's just very atmospheric. It's very descriptive. It's very beautifully written. And I'm really enjoying the setup, just meeting the people and meeting the town. And I think it's going to be slow, but I think I'm going to love it. Hey, checking in. I feel like I've lost my vlogging mojo. Like, I realized I didn't even vlog about the 2 short stories by George Macdonald that I read, which maybe I'll try and do that. But I read 2 stories by George Macdonald for the short story category, and I want to check in about Miss Miles, but I'm a little hurried at the moment, but I noticed that there was nobody in my office, nobody in my classroom. So I thought I would check in really quick because it's been days and I keep forgetting to check in. I am loving Miss Miles. It is fairly slow going, about 125 pages in. And it's just like a really solid story with really beautiful writing. It evokes images, and I still want to share a longer passage about the kids going sledding and like creating this slide, because it just feels so slice of life, but it's slice of 1800s life, and it feels like it could be in the 1940s or the 2010, like it feels so current as well. But then it's also just peppered with highly unreadable dialogue because she's trying to capture the vernacular of the people. And so sometimes I get really bogged down in trying to understand what the people are saying to each other. And that is its only flaw so far. It is about 3 friends, 3 girls, and it's a lot about hypocrisy in the church. It's a lot about a woman's right to take care of herself. And I'm just really enjoying it quite a lot. I think that it should be read more frequently. If you can get your hands on a copy of it and you like Victorian literature, I think this could be a prime choice for you for next year, for sure. But those are my very quick thoughts. I am going to check in because, oh my goodness, I haven't checked in such a long time thoughts. And I will hopefully have a chance to sit down and do a more in-depth share about it soon. In the meantime, I have to go get to a meeting. I'll see you soon. Oh my goodness, it is cold outside. I'm wearing a sweater for the first time all autumn. It is clean air and it's supposed to rain for like today and forever. I'm so happy. I think fall is finally here in the Pacific Northwest. It's my favorite time of the year in the Pacific Northwest, and it's finally back and I'm so excited. Yeah, anyway, it's gonna be a super busy day. Won't be able to check in about the book most likely. Tomorrow I have to come back into work for an open house, and then this weekend I will finish Miss Miles. I will finish up this vlog, most likely. It has been so much fun to do this vlog. Again, I think I said this in a previous clip, I feel like I lost my vlogging mojo here near the end. I think that maybe I can't maintain a whole month. But I did pretty good, I think, and we'll see. We'll see how I wrap it up. I don't know. But for now, I just wanted to check in because I'm so excited. It's like dark and cold and there's wetness in the air, and I'm just so happy to understand where I am. I'm not in this vortex of smoke and heat anymore going almost in November. It's been a weird year and I do not like it. But for now, I gotta go get ready to teach. Yesterday we stayed home to teach online because the air quality was that bad. But I'm back today. It's a Friday. Hip hip hooray. I'll see you later. Hi. We've got some fake fire going here, and we've got a sleeping puppy, and we've got a cup of coffee, and we've got, finally, I'm holding my phone in one hand and trying to maneuver everything. We finally get to talk about Miss Miles. I just played Kate Howe's Dingbats, very fun. Some of them were very difficult, for me anyway, and some of them were just right. But overall, it was a great time, super fun. So, Miss Miles, I finished this days ago. I just haven't had a chance to wrap it up, talk with you about it, and read to you some of my favorite parts, bits and pieces. I thought for a long time, I have so many things to say about it. I've journaled about this book to try and pull my thoughts together because there are so many things rolling around in my head about the author. Like, I couldn't read this separate from the author, and I think the author is wonderful in her own right, but I couldn't see her not in relation to Charlotte Bronte and think about, like, I was fully aware the whole time I was reading it, like, this woman knew Charlotte Bronte. I don't do that when I read Elizabeth Gaskell. I don't know. I think because she was a childhood friend, and so many of the things that she's talking about feel like things that I've read about in in biographies and things about the Brontes. For example, she talks a lot about John Wesley. In the story, the characters in the book talk about John Wesley. For example, it says, there was another cause for the enmity that then existed between the upper classes and the lower through the country. It has been written with authority that if it had not been for Wesley and Whitfield, the names of Christ would have been unknown in that part of Yorkshire. And I have read of Mrs. Bronte, Maria Bronte, Charlotte et al.'s mother, the influence that Wesley had on their family in a great biography about Maria Bronte, which I cannot remember what it's called right now, but I'll try to put a picture of it here. And in that, it talks so much about the influence of John Wesley on her family and her belief system, and how she brought that to Patrick, and how he incorporated and declined some of it. But Wesley was a big influence on Anne as well. And Anne's belief system deviates from the rest of the family quite significantly, which I read about in a different biography, which I will put up here. But that biography of Maria Branwell was just really exquisitely done, and I highly suggest that you read it if it is of interest to you at all. Even if you feel like you've read everything, or how could they have enough information about Maria Bronte? It's so well done. But in that, it also talks about John Wesley, and it talks about how his house was haunted. He had poltergeists in his house and did like cleansings and things like that, which was just fascinating to me as a person who loves to watch ghost hunting shows. Like, to have all of my worlds, like the Brontes and religion and ghosts, all just kind of commingle together. It was really funny. But that statement that Mary Taylor puts in her book, where she says, like, it has been stated with authority. And I just think, well, is Patrick Bronte that authority? Yeah, it's just super fun. It's super, super fun to think about the influences that she had on the Bronte family, but more so that the Bronte family might have had on her. Mary Taylor was a formidable woman. She was amazing. She grew up wealthy. Her father lived outside his means, though, and they lost everything. And when he died, she was being harassed by creditors, and so she just decided that instead of trying to, that she wasn't, and Charlotte says it too, like, she's not made to be like a traditional working woman in Victorian England. She's not going to make it as a governess. She's not going to make it as a seamstress. She's not going to fit into any of the molds that have been cast for women. Even though she's a hard worker and she's willing to work, those kinds of things will just kill her. And so she decides instead to start clean and fresh and immigrate to New Zealand. And Charlotte knows she's losing her best friend. She will probably never see her again. The idea is that Mary Taylor will settle there and live there forever. Her brother is out there. Charlotte sends her a bunch of money. I think it was the equivalent of over $1,000 or something. It says somewhere that I read. It was a significant amount of money to buy a cow in New Zealand. And she makes a good go of it, but it's really, really hard. And after some deaths and some destructions of different kinds, she does come back to England. But she ends up taking schools, like girls' schools and women's groups, on treks, hiking in the Swiss mountains and things like that. Like, she's just absolutely amazing. She writes feminist articles for a newspaper, and the whole time she's working on this novel, she works on it for decades. And you can tell every word is like very carefully picked. Every sentence, every paragraph, every chapter bleeding into the next. Like, it's pretty exquisite and also down to earth. I I've thought long and hard about this book, and I've thought long and hard about what I want to say about this book, because I'm also acutely aware that this is probably one of the few Victorian novels that is completely unspoiled for the vast majority of Victorian novel lovers. I've never heard anyone talk about this book. That doesn't mean that I've heard everyone who's ever spoken about Victorian novels, obviously, but I think that there is a huge majority of Victorian novel readers who have not read this book. And I don't want to ruin it for you. I want you to be able to have the same kind of experience that I did and go into it completely, with a completely clean slate. And so I don't want to talk too much about plot. I will say that you should read the introduction before you read the novel. There are a couple of spoilers, but nothing huge. It gives such a great context for the book, for the author, for the time, and I just think that it is required reading. I think that if you can get a copy of this one, you should, like this particular copy from Oxford Paperbacks. And I've looked, and they are readily available for very inexpensive on places like Abe Books, etc. I happened to pick mine up in a used bookstore, and just felt really blessed and lucky to have seen it and found it and recognized the name of the author. Otherwise, I probably would have just skimmed right past it. So Mary Taylor was just this amazing, formidable woman who I wish I knew more about. She is just a striking figure, and she writes a book, which I won't tell you much about, but it is set in Yorkshire. It's about 3 young women. It's also very much about faith and very much about society and what 3 young women are capable of, what society says they're capable of, the limits that society tries to put on them, and how they kind of buck against those. But all 3 young women have different backgrounds and take different but intertwined paths through life. And then in the end, we see kind of how it works out for them and how their choices impact those around them and themselves. It's slow and sweet, but not saccharine, and just so crisply written. I've already read to you one of my favorite parts, which is that sentence, "It was in this year that a strange man came to the great house wanting a strange thing." She tells a story, like, it feels so carefully rendered. Here is a bit about some kids who are out playing. It says, "Then they all tramped up the hill, Sarah critically eyeing the slide as she went along. She led off." This is a slide that the kids have made. They've called Sarah out to play with them, and because they've made a ice slide. It's the winter, and they've used pails of water and things to make a slide for them to slide down out of ice. So it says, "Then they all tramped up the hill, Sarah critically eyeing the slide as she went along. She led off on the way down, and it was no slight test of activity to do so. The hill was steep, the causeway often interrupted, and the ground rough. The only way to avoid being thrown down by such obstacles was to regain the perpendicular by a desperate leap forwards, or to take a run when they could not slide, and so running, leaping, flying, to make their way to the bottom. Again and again they tramped up the hill and flew down, each time leaping into the snowdrift at the bottom, till all were assembled. They were laying in a stock of courage, health, and energy that would benefit them for the whole of their natural lives. True, they were most of them forbidden to do it, but they were blessed with a healthy instinct that set authority at defiance." It says, "On this particular Saturday before Christmas, in the house or living room behind the shop, Sarah Miles was cleaning up. She had washed the floor, replaced the chairs, and dusted the furniture, and now prepared to end her labors by washing the doorstep. As she opened the door, she took a look up the lane and down the lane, sure of seeing someone she knew and probably someone to speak to. She soon made out a little girl of her own age standing outside the crowd and peering into the shop. It's so vivid. It's just such gorgeously vivid writing. The prospect was not encouraging, so she did what most of us do in similar circumstances. She shut her eyes to the evidence and resolutely refused to believe it. It's just so wonderful. It's so wonderful. And I am gonna skip to the end and not read you the end, but read you a little bit of the end. And I'm not gonna say who it's talking about because I don't want to ruin anything, but it just says, so-and-so had many changes and many sorrows, so we had better leave them in sight of that paradise which never comes but at the end of a novel. The end. The whole thing just gives you like warm, loving vibes, and I definitely think that this is a novel that needs to be read more often. I'll read you a little bit of the back because I do feel like you do need to know more about what the book is about, but I'm really afraid of starting to talk about it and unraveling the entire thing. So the back of it says, I'm not reading everything, but part of it says, in this, the only edition of Miss Miles available, which isn't true anymore, but okay. Taylor breaks with tradition by creating a profoundly feminist and morally intense novel which depicts female friendships as sustaining life and sanity through the vicissitudes of Victorian womanhood. Set in the small Yorkshire village of Repton against the backdrop of starvation in the wool districts and the rise of Charterism in the 1830s, this extraordinary work chronicles the lives of socially disparate women as they learn to find their own voices and support one another. Taylor's own courage and allegiances to her friends is wonderfully reflected in each of these individually ambitious women, while the novel's emphasis on the healing power of women's friendship echoes the relationship between Bronte and Taylor herself. Originally published in 1890, Miss Miles continues to stand as an eloquent polemic in favor of women's personal obligation to support herself. It is a classic that will delight all lovers of fine literature. And I would agree with that. There's also a quote from Charlotte Bronte on the back here about Mary Taylor. Charlotte Bronte wrote in 1841, "Mary alone has more energy and power in her nature than any 10 men you can pick out. It is vain to limit a character like hers within ordinary boundaries. She will overstep them. I am morally certain Mary will establish her own landmark." I think it's time for Mary Taylor to be recognized as the literary author that she is. In her time, I think she wrote her feminist articles under her own name, and she wasn't thinking of them as feminist, obviously, but she was thinking of them as, she was thinking of herself as a human being and a person and writing from that perspective. She was thinking of women as people and writing from that perspective. Shocking, I know. But she wrote some pretty amazing articles, I believe, because I've read bits and pieces of them in the introduction to this book. I would love to read more by Mary Taylor. This is her only novel. Like I said, she was working on it for decades. And I wish she had more. But I would highly, highly, highly recommend Miss Miles by Mary Taylor. Yes, read it because you're a Bronte fan, but also just read it because, wow, it's a really great story. And it's really beautifully written. It's got heart and warmth. And I would love for more people to read it so that I could talk more openly about it. I have favorite characters. I have frustrating moments, like why on earth does this character do this? But overall, I would say this was a high that I have ended my Victober reading on. And this was a really good reading month. I would say that my favorite, so I read Miss Miles, I read The Moonstone, I read Uncle Silas, I read The Mayor of Casterbridge, I read the poems of Gerard Manley Hopkins, and I read 2 short stories from George Macdonald. And I will say that my favorite of those that I read was Uncle Silas. I loved Uncle Silas so much, ridiculously much. I absolutely loved Uncle Silas. I would then say my next favorite read was Mary Taylor, so Miss Miles. So Uncle Silas and then Miss Miles. I would say my next favorite read was The Mayor of Casterbridge. Wild departure from the norm. I would even venture to say I hate Thomas Hardy, and I actually am so grateful for the people who picked. I was really upset because I wanted Deerbrook to be picked, but I will say thank you to the people who picked The Mayor of Casterbridge, because I never would have picked it up ever, but I did, and I actually really, really loved it. So I would say that was my third favorite read this month. The Moonstone would be the fourth, Gerard Manley Hopkins would be the fifth, and down there on the bottom, all alone, poor little George Macdonald, who I love as an author, but I struggle with short stories. I just do. I just struggle with short stories. They are not my jam. But I did enjoy those two short stories that I read by him. They were fantastical fairy tale type stories, and very much in his vein. If you've read anything like The Princess and the Goblin or The Princess and Curdie by him, they feel very much like that, or At the Back of the North Wind. All books that I very much enjoy, but all are book length books. Yeah, so I would recommend those over the short stories just because I don't love short stories. Lilith by him, I would also recommend. And then he's got in the 1980s, 1990s, Michael Phillips with Bethany House partnered together to put out not retellings or translations, because technically they're written in English, but to clean up some of the Scottish brogue that is dominant in most of Macdonald's novels, his like religious romance novels. And so Michael Phillips did a whole slew of those and redid those. And I've read a handful of them. The Curate's Apprentice comes to mind. I've read many of them, and I would recognize the covers, but not necessarily remember the titles. I read them when I was in college and a teen and stuff. And I would recommend most of those. Some of them are pretty boring, but most of them are very engaging, and a lot of them are loosely in series or duologies. So I would recommend those. But before all of that, I would recommend from George Macdonald, if you really want to love him, I would recommend The Princess and the Goblin, The Princess and Curdie, At the Back of the North Wind, and Lilith. All of those are really wonderful fantasy type reads. And these short stories, like I said, were in that vein, but I just don't connect to short stories. I just don't. So he's down at the bottom. And then Gerard Manley Hopkins is down there. And I really loved my moments with Gerard Manley Hopkins. And I would count him as one of my favorite poets. And I do read poetry, and I do write poetry, and I do love poetry. And he is definitely one of my favorites. But I think the novels this month that I picked, this Victober, the novels were all so compelling that they really took the cake this year. They just really took the cake. I didn't have a single dud read this whole Victober. I can't believe that. I did not get to, once again, Wives and Daughters. I did not get to it. I've never read Wives and Daughters, and I need to read it, and maybe I won't wait till Victober. Maybe I'll read it in January. I don't know. And I did not get to my reread of Deerbrook, which is okay. I've read it. I know I love it. I want to read it again, but I was just so excited by every new book that I picked up. I had never read Uncle Silas. I had never read The Moonstone. I had never read The Mayor of Casterbridge, and I had not read Miss Miles. So I just met 4 new to me books from the Victorian era that were all 4 stars or more. And I could not be happier. I could not be happier. Uncle Silas was definitely my favorite, though, most assuredly. Also, first for me, an entire month-long vlog. the experience of doing a month-long vlog has been so positive. I did kind of lose my mojo for checking in and talking to you in real time about where I was in the books and what was happening and what I was reading, and how it was impacting me in that moment. I did that so well with the first book I read, which was Uncle Silas. But I have to tell you that with the exception of the Moonstone, which I listened to on audio, that was a complete audio listen, and I also listened to a lot of it while I was sick. And I loved it, but I really don't think I got as much out of it as I got out of Uncle Silas, the Mayor of Casterbridge, and Miss Miles. And I think that that's because I listened to it and because I was sick. With the exception of the Moonstone, which I just didn't think to check in with you about because I was listening and it was a different process and it felt weird. I have just as many journal entries, just as many, I had just as many moments of, oh my gosh, as I did with Uncle Silas. I just didn't catch them on camera because I just stopped thinking about it after a while. I don't know. I lost my momentum or whatever, but I really enjoyed. I think it will just take discipline and like building the month-long vlog muscle. But I really enjoyed it. And I'm playing with the idea of not doing wrap-ups next year, but instead just vlogging my reading each month and doing wrap-ups in real time. And then putting them all together in a wrap-up vlog at the end of the month. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do whatever feels good and feels right to me. I'm not the kind of booktuber that's like, what do you want me to do? And I'll do it. I don't have that kind of commitment. But I will do whatever feels right. And doing this vlog felt really fun. I liked checking in often, even though I kind of lost the habit of it halfway through the month when things got off schedule because I got sick and everything. I really enjoyed it while I was doing it. I really enjoyed checking in. I'm a verbal processor anyway, so I really enjoyed talking through my thoughts. And I don't know if the vlog will be long. It'll be like an hour or a little bit more. But I liked making it and keeping up with it. And I don't know if anybody will like watching it, but I'm going to put it out there. I think it was a good process for me. I think it was valuable for me in processing what I was reading. And that is reason enough for me to do it again in the future. If you also would like to watch it and enjoy it, that's great. In case we're not clear, I am in no way attempting to be an influencer on BookTube. I just like to be here to talk with people about books and to see what they say about books. Those are the channels I really enjoy watching, and that's the kind of channel that I like trying to maintain in my free time, which is very small. But I'm just so happy with how Victober went. And I'm so grateful to the people who host Victober every year. And I'm so happy to have read so many great books this month that really captured my imagination and required my commitment. There's just something, I've also been reading interspersed between my Victorian reads, and here the last week of the month, I've been reading spooky books because it's October. And those books just go so fast. I can literally read one a day if I wanted to. And it's just such a different, which is a great experience in and of itself. It's a different kind of experience, but there's something so wonderful for my brain about slowing down and digging in to Victorian literature. It feels weirdly like coming home. And it just makes me want to read Jane Eyre again every year. Every year I'm like, oh, I just really want to read Jane Eyre now. So maybe I'll go read Jane Eyre. I don't know. But thank you to everybody who participates in Victober and who hosts Victober and makes this a thing, because it's a joy. It's really quite a joy. It's like a holiday. It's like a month-long holiday to me now. And I can't remember life before Victober. And I forget that the whole world doesn't know what Victober is. I was at an open house for my school. I teach, and I was at an open house for my school, and one of the teachers who was at the table that I was stationed at was like, "Hey, what have you read lately?" I was like, "Oh, this great book, Uncle Silas." And she just slowly glossed over, and then I was like, "Oh, let me back up, let me explain, like it's Victober," and then slowly more glossing over. So finally I was like, "Oh yeah, I also read this book called Library of the Dead." Let's talk about that instead. The whole world doesn't love Victorian literature like I love Victorian literature, but I know that there's a large portion of the world that does because of Victober. So thank you. Thank you all. Until we meet again. Let's go read.